John, it's a sad day for many reasons. We are commemorating the third annual memorial. I never know what to call these kind of terrible events when we commemorate them each year. But not only that, this is the first broadcast since I've learned of the death of Larry Nichols. And I know he doesn't really have
Oh
anything to
God,
do. Oh, I might not have told you. Yeah, he doesn't really have anything to do
no.
with Vegas, but I want to let people know. And
Oh God,
somewhere I hope Larry
that's
is
horrible.
watching us right now. Yeah, it was really upsetting because I
And
spoke to him on Saturday and I couldn't believe how good he sounded. And he died Sunday.
oh man, that's horrible. My sympathies to his family. That's horrible.
Yeah,
Very sad.
yeah. I mean, it's a melancholy day, John. You know, we're also remembering the lives of those that were killed and so many hundreds whose lives were changed forever by an event that, like so many, really hasn't been addressed by law enforcement, hasn't been properly investigated by the FBI. We got a slipshod, kind of a fit report, and a lot of people telling us that Stephen Paddock was in the room with 20 whatever guns shooting the place up. You've done more work
Hmm.
on this, John, and deeper work than anybody else. There's a lot of people who have come to the show and learned about you really as a result of your investigation into coronavirus and the numbers and statistics and details that are put out by the various public health organizations. But initially, you got started investigating the Las Vegas shooting. Can you give us just the sort of brief overview of how you got into it, what you've discovered for the people who are maybe watching and aren't familiar with the Las Vegas work?
Sure. So 3 years ago today, or 3 years ago Sunday night, um, I was in my office and just was, had my eye on Drudge Report as I was getting work done, and living in Thailand, the time zone difference between Thailand and Las Vegas was such that I think at the time, 10 p.m. was noon. And I'm just sitting at my desk doing work, and it's in the middle of the day. And all of a sudden, the stuff starts coming up on Drudge Report. And I check Facebook and I check Twitter, and all hell's breaking loose in Las Vegas. And it's 10 p.m. in Vegas. And as the attack goes on and Lombardo goes and starts to speak, I think he may have addressed the media for the first time at 12:30 or 1 a.m. or something like that. And by that time, it was, mid-afternoon in Thailand. And so I was riveted. I was watching the whole thing unfold at that point and had a TV in my office. And in fact, I took you to the office. Remember, we went to the
Yeah.
office? We went up the spiral staircase. So I'm sitting in there and I'm watching all this transpire. And when Joe Lombardo came out, I guess it was at 1:30 in the morning, and said, "We've got a lone gunman," I
Right.
was like, how the hell did you guys get up on the roofs of all those hotels that quick? How did you get up on the roof of the Excalibur and get up to the top of the Tropicana? I mean, you got up there that quick and checked everywhere for shells? You know there was no other shooter? How the hell do you guys figure that out in an hour? And I was kind of dumbfounded by that and, taken aback. And that was the beginning of my cognitive dissonance. And uh, I've said it before. I was a bit of an unwilling or unwitting participant. I didn't sign up for this. I just happened to be watching at the time, and it didn't make sense to me. And my curiosity got the better of me, and lo and behold, here I am incognito 3 years later.
Yeah. And it's funny, just at this moment, I happen to stop the cursor on one of these videos here that features Jake Morphonios. For people who missed that, at the time that I first became aware of you, John, it was because you had introduced evidence that was suggestive that there were objects hovering in the sky at heights and in locations over the city where helicopters are never allowed to fly, but they were behaving in a way that really only helicopters can. I mean, there's no other aircraft that we know of that can just hover a couple hundred feet in the air. And initially, this was poo-pooed by so many people who fancied themselves experts on the topic. Really, probably the biggest guy to try to crap in the punch bowl, both literally and figuratively, was Jake Morphonios. Now, I had invited Jake on the show because I was watching his YouTube channel at the time. I thought he was doing good investigative journalism. And in fact, I think he may have been up until a point. This is something I've been touching on in my new series about Robert David Steele's anti-speech strategy. It seems that someone who is extremely effective eventually gets approached to kind of join the other side, and this can either be a friendly invitation through money. I'm not suggesting that this happened to Jake Morphonios. I'm just saying I've seen this. They tried to do it to me. There's an offer first. It's the carrot and stick. If you decline the offer, then you get beaten with the stick. It's notable that Jake Morphonios was also sued, but the lawsuit never went forward. So I don't know what happened after that, but Jake was real adamant that there were no helicopters, that it was Stephen Paddock doing the shooting. In the years since that happened, police body camera footage has been released that reveals that the windows in Paddock's room were not even broken at the time that he was alleged to be dead. And there's a lot of problems.
Yeah, that was Shepard Ambellis broke that a year ago today. In fact, 1 year ago today on the second anniversary was the first I ever appeared on camera. I hadn't shown my face or whatever the hell you would call this for 2 years. And the first time I ever did was a year ago today with you and Laura Loomer.
Right.
And we, compared notes, and Laura broke some really interesting aspects of the case about the women that had been registered to the room with Stephen Paddock. And I took, again, a lot of the times I would take a break from Laura or take a break from Shepard Ambellis and then run with it. So Shep broke the aspect that the window wasn't broken, and then I built on that, right? Laura broke the aspect that there were 3 women in the room with Stephen Paddock. I went and found out their first names. I think Laura was able to find out the last name of 1 or 2 of them. And then we started to see the tweets that were coming from one of the girls coming from, I guess she's on Australia or something. So there were a whole bunch of different aspects that we put together 2 years ago on this show, a year ago on this show with Laura. And we talked about that stuff. But tonight we're going to be breaking something that no one's ever seen. And this is an interview that I was fortunate enough to be able to do with someone who hasn't come forward for 3 years.
It's a big deal.
It is.
Yeah, it's a real big deal. The other thing that we're doing tonight, John, this is a special presentation, and ordinarily you and I are doing a sponsor-exclusive show on Fridays. We will be back on tomorrow, getting back, I presume, to the coronavirus investigation, but people can see the show every Friday on subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen, patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, and Subscribestar and Patreon/Crowdsource the Truth. It's super important that people sponsor these shows. I think everybody over time has started to realize what's happening. This is not about you and I trying to extract money from people. It is clear that if you come forward with information that doesn't comport with whatever it is that the people who control this type of information want the public to know about, you get the hammer. And that is being thrown off of Twitter, being thrown off of YouTube, getting strikes on Vimeo. So we basically
look at Roger Stone. Look at Roger Stone. Look at Julian Assange. Look at Edward Snowden. When you show your face and you share your name, you become a target. And you just you just rose up out of the water recently. I mean, you've been dealing with lawsuits for 3 years, right? So if it's not, if they don't place you under arrest and put you in handcuffs, they figuratively do it with legal crap and handcuff you that way. And now we're dealing with more nonsense. So
Yeah. We got the Emmys
yeah,
lawsuit. So they don't let up.
yeah,
It's lawfare, whether it's
no,
criminal or civil. And I mean, this is an important aspect. So we definitely rely on the viewer sponsors to keep this show going. And, you know, right now, I just spoke this morning, John, with the developer who's creating the new video host for Crowdsource the Truth. And this is not going to be a competitor to YouTube. This is not going to be offered to everybody to upload videos. This is going to be a video host that Crowdsource the Truth controls. And it's going to make sure that the sponsor exclusive shows that we put out with all the hosts will be safely delivered to people. And you can't just have a terms of service policy where if you question any kind of mass tragedy, you get a strike. I mean, that is a risk. Anytime even though we're presenting evidence, whether it's coronavirus or the Las Vegas shooting or 9/11, they literally have a policy that says you cannot question this stuff. It seems very un-American, very unscientific, and just bad.
hmm indeed. And we've been questioning this all along. Who is the arbiter of truth? And at Facebook, at Twitter, at YouTube, a lot of the employees are 26, 27, 28 years old. And we know that they don't yet have fully adult formed brains, according to scientists, not according to me, according to scientists. So basically, we've got adolescents making decisions and editing the president and things like that. In fact, I heard that Hungary's president was kicked off of Twitter within the last 48. Yeah, the president of Hungary was kicked off of Twitter within the last 48 hours.
That's wild.
It's just out of control. Yeah, these guys are nuts. So, we talk about the Fifth Estate, and the Fifth Estate is supposed to be keeping the checks and balances, on the Fourth Estate and the Third Estate. And that's kind of, the role that we're supposed to be playing. I was very disappointed after the Las Vegas shooting. All of these quote unquote Fifth Estate characters, other than you and Shepard, were carrying on like, I don't want to name names, right? That wouldn't be nice. But I don't know, guys like, March for something or other. And, send us money and we can't do this without you. And Vegas isn't going away. Vegas isn't going away. And that's all I kept hearing. And I kept hearing this from a bunch of these characters, and these are, again, I don't want to name names, but you know who I'm talking about. It's like these guys that were all out there, and I guess Morphonius was one of them at the time. And like you, I had respect for Jake. I was watching his stuff and trying to post comments there. So, I thought he was legit too at one point. But I was disappointed. Nobody was really digging into this. And I kept watching the footage that kept showing up and saying, what the hell's going on? How is nobody doing this? And I had some time to work on it. So I did. And I poured myself into it and said, you know what? I have an opportunity here to really dig in. And that's what I did. And I spent about 10 days going as hard as I could, basically pulling all-nighters for as long as I could, and then I would sleep for 2 hours or 3 hours, take a shower, and keep going. And I did that for 10 days until I just hit a wall. But on the seventh day, on October the 8th, I saw the helicopter.
Yeah. And again, at the time, it was a bit of a, obviously you had evidence, but it was a bit of a reach. And, the skepticism was well-founded. We're not saying that people can't question hypotheses. But the thing that's astounding, John, is that with every question, and there were things that you reconsidered, there were paths you went down that you realized were the wrong path. But what's happened now, 3 years later, is that this has been distilled down not just because of a couple of blinking lights in the sky, but research into the history of the Saudi Arabian royal family, the ongoing political turmoil within, the royal family politics, what seemed to be warring factions with Al Walid on one side and bin Salman on the other side. And I have to say, John, there's a legal term that I've become aware of called prima facie evidence. And that means the most convincing evidence available. This is basically the best evidence. And it remains that at that status until somebody comes along and presents better evidence, like just saying things about you, which was the approach that Jake Morphonios took. He tried to trap you, to try to convince the audience that you were somehow lying about being in Thailand. People who've been with us the whole time are going to recall that I went and visited you in Thailand. We looked at some of the locations that you had photographed in this ridiculous argument with Jake, confirmed that they were in Thailand. He just simply said, there's no way that you're in Thailand because you don't speak Thai. You're just an old white guy who's hanging out in Thailand, not speaking Thai that well. But the point is, as time has gone on, additional evidence has only strengthened your hypothesis. And tonight, we present viewers with the latest piece of evidence that only strengthens it more.
Indeed. And, it's fascinating. You think about all the people who were there and all the people who witnessed this event and what it must feel like to see this, to watch it happen, and what it must feel like to be shot at, right? To be in the audience, to be in the concert. Well, we're going to hear tonight from a man who was not there, who was not at the concert, who was on the other side of Mandalay Bay, and got a completely different perspective. And we're going to share some footage with you tonight on a documentary that I put together about this interview. And it's about an hour long, the documentary. We're not going to play the whole thing tonight. We're also not going to Patreon, right? We're not going to Patreon or Subscribestar tonight. Yeah, this is going to be on YouTube. All right, so what we're going to do is play some clips from this 1 hour documentary for you guys to show you just sort of the highlights of it. After the show tonight, I think you've got another show with Mike Moore from True Pundit, right? You've got another show tonight?
Yes.
All right, so after your show with Mike, after your True Pundit show tonight, this 1 hour video will be available on Patreon and on Subscribestar as a sort of a sneak peek, and it will go live Sunday night at 10 o'clock.
But it's important that people know that this is going to be on John Cullen's Patreon and Subscribestar. This is a documentary that John worked on, a contact that John made. So subscribers who are on subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen and patreon.com/IamJohnCullen will get to enjoy an early release. As John said, on Sunday, it'll be available for everybody on the John E. Hoover YouTube channel. So for people who aren't yet subscribed to John's YouTube channel, now's a good time to make your way over there. John's channel has been growing, and of course, people can just find it by searching for John E. Hoover. You can always watch our simulcasts live streaming on there, and I want to say hello to the over 230 people who are watching us there right now. And without further ado, John, maybe we should just get right into the footage from the documentary.
Yeah, let me set it up a little bit, and I want the audience to understand. For those of you who've seen some of my work before, one of the tools that I've used to try and explain various aspects of this attack is something that we call the gorilla illusion. And I'm just going to leave it at that. And those of you who know what I'm talking about, know what I'm talking about. The guy who witnessed this stuff may not have seen the gorilla. That's okay. That doesn't mean he's lying. It simply means he didn't see the gorilla. Okay? So when we talk to various witnesses, keep in mind, not everybody sees everything. That doesn't mean they're lying. It just means they didn't see the gorilla, right? So if you start to ask the guy, well, what about the gorilla? There was a gorilla. I saw the gorilla. What do you mean you didn't? He's not lying. He just didn't see it. So keep that in the back of your mind as we watch this. And remember, he's got one perspective on the attack, and this changes everything. The music is all mine, by the way, so we don't have to worry about copyrights. I wrote that. Yeah, that's my track.
my dogs over to this area, and I got out of the car about 10:04. And as I was getting out of the car, I looked, down this way to the east, and I saw a plane make this bank to the south. I mean, I've never seen a turn like this before. It banked really sharply to the south, like a car would swerve to avoid a person or something. That dramatic a turn. And I thought, God, that was strange. I thought maybe it was a plane crash or something. And then almost simultaneously, all the emergency vehicle sirens started coming up, from everywhere. You don't really realize how many they are until they all turn on the lights and start heading a certain direction. And that's what happened. I mean, everyone you can imagine just started heading east. And I was thinking, oh my God, there's a plane crash, right? What's going on? And then I looked over to, the dogs got out and they ran out, and I was watching them, and Mandalay Bay was in sight, and I saw these helicopters on the top of Mandalay Bay. Actually, I gave them a look when I saw it when I first got out of the car and I saw the plane. I looked over there and I didn't see the helicopters, and the next time I looked over, they were there. It's like they just appeared, and I assume, right, the plane that made the swerve to the south, you can assume that they may have gotten word there was gunshots. Look out, because they swerved before they got over Las Vegas Boulevard. But then another plane flew over like a minute later, which was odd because I thought, well, there's no plane crash. And then that was weird. And then that was the end of air travel for that night. And then after that second plane flew over, and I looked over at Mandalay Bay, and I could see 3 helicopters, one between the Delano and the Luxor in the stadium. We might not be able to see it now because the stadium, if it was flying there today, because the stadium would be blocking the view. It was flying that low. And then there was another one about a third of the height between Delano and Mandalay Bay. And that was, and then there's another one that was on top of the roof. And it had, I don't know, spotlight or something. It had something, so I could see shadows of people on the roof.
What was it like when you were on the roof? Tell us about it.
You can stop it here. Hit pause.
Okay, well, I was doing my job. I was.
So, John, that's amazing because in addition to having this world exclusive firsthand eyewitness testimony, this is crowdsourced the truth like rubber meeting the road, because, correct me if I'm wrong, the guy giving you the eyewitness testimony, he's a viewer.
He's not just a viewer, he's a patron. So he's been a supporting patron on Patreon. And 3 years later, he's like, look, what am I living for?
He felt compelled to, listen, people are scared. They've heard stories about strange deaths of witnesses. Obviously, if this is what we've said, it's dangerous to come out and say this stuff.
Exactly. It's very brave. And I want him to be an example for others because, remember when Clarissa did the interview on the confessional?
Right.
And right. So we get the interview from Clarissa on the confessional, and he had the dog walking guy, which is what I call him, is the dog walking guy. Right. So like in the JFK shooting, we had the umbrella man. Man. So he's
right. So
this is
he's the dog walking guy.
Right. This is the dog walking guy. So the dog walking guy, he has this perspective from back there. He doesn't know there's a shooting going on.
Right.
He doesn't know there's a shooting. All right. So you have to really understand this perspective is completely different. Okay. He's watching this, has no idea what's happening at the concert. He's walking his dogs. Okay. The other thing is, people who are watching this might say, well, wait a second, maybe this is just like a John Cullen fan who's coming forward and, singing from the hymnal. And what you're going to see as we go through the interview is he's arguing with me half the time. He's like, no, I didn't see that. No. So That's why I'm putting the evidence in the film, because there's a bunch of points that he's like, no, I didn't see that. And I'm like, well, yeah, no, we got footage of that. Let me show you. And so you're going to see the footage. So he's not going along with it per se. Mm-hmm. And what you're going to hear in the interview as we go on tonight is he's changing things. He's changing things that I thought were true. And he's introducing new doubt and I'm going to give you an example. Okay. I thought all the attacking helicopters were AH-6Is because there were half a dozen of them sitting in Mesa getting ready to be shipped to Saudi Arabia. And they were just sitting there on the tarmac. But that doesn't mean that they couldn't be Apaches. I assumed, right? And this is part of the process. Part of the thing that I don't know what it is about me, I'm very comfortable admitting when I'm wrong and that, I got that part wrong, right? So if they weren't AH-6Is and they were Apaches, holy mackerel, that's even
what would that mean?
It's more horrifying. Full-on combat helicopters or Blackhawks. He's saying they didn't look as round as the AH-6Is. They looked more angular. So meaning they could have been Blackhawks. They could have been, yeah. So these are new angles to the story. That's what I mean. This changes everything. His account of this, he doesn't know there's gunfire, so he's just watching. And and as we go on in this interview, I want you to jump forward, if you would, to let's see, let's go to 708.
Oh, you don't want the second cue point?
Let's go to 708.
Okay.
Jump ahead to 708.
So real quick, before we play the next segment, we've got one question that's persistently coming up here in the chat. People are saying, wouldn't helicopters be loud and wouldn't you hear them? And that occurred to me as well. But even when I was in Las Vegas, after the shooting and looked up at the sky, you can observe a number of helicopters up there and you really don't hear them as much as you might anticipate you would. I guess because the nature of the way a city is laid out with buildings and how the sound from a helicopter, there's traffic all around you. There's a kind of a lot of noise, even when it doesn't seem like it. And I did not hear helicopters. Not to mention, there's so much screaming and, you've heard helicopters in some footage, haven't you, John?
Turns out that some of what I thought was helicopters was some sort of glitch in a Wi-Fi camera, right? Or a GoPro camera having to do with Wi-Fi. So that we throw that out. Do we hear helicopters? We might. However, if we're dealing with military helicopters, they've got 6 rotors on top. They're made to be silent. And when the CIA built this particular model, it was called the silent one. It was used to sneak into Vietnam and clip the wires. So it was called the silent one. So they're designed to be quiet. Yeah. And that was 50 years ago, 60 years ago. So with today's technology, they could be real quiet. Now, the police helicopter makes a racket. The police helicopter is noisy as all hell. But these attack helicopters are not, right? And we're going to hear more about that. So why don't we play this clip from 708 and here he's going to talk a little bit. Yeah, exactly.
Just real quick, I wanted to show this because this particular helicopter, if they did use AH-6I, and this is just from February of this year, it looks like Boeing won the rights to the patent. They're not showing the right version of the bird right here, but there is a version of the AH-6I called the NOTAR that has no tail rotor, and it uses a jet of exhaust gas from the engine rather than the conventional tail rotor to, control and stabilize the aircraft. And that also contributes to its quiet operation.
Yeah. Now, Lynn Tilton is no longer with McDonnell Douglas Helicopter. She had to sell it.
I wonder
and we did a
how
show
that came about.
We did a show. Yeah, we did a show on her and McDonnell Douglas, and she's no longer there. They had to declare bankruptcy or something or other. Really? So that's a whole other story. We'll have to dig into that.
As Bishop Gators would say, it's another story for another day.
Indeed. But assume that these helicopters are more quiet than you think.
Yeah.
And that the sound of people screaming and the sound of the gunfire is kind of drowning it out. And the helicopters are, they're not necessarily right on top of everybody, right?
Right.
And remember,
and when you're in shock,
you
you're
see
not
them
necessarily
and you see
dialed
them
in.
on film. Right.
Yeah.
You see them on film. These are not seagulls wearing headlamps, right? These are not flying frogs, right? These are helicopters, right? So you see them. Just because you can't hear them doesn't mean they're not there.
Right.
You see them, right? I mean, you see jet planes also. You don't hear them necessarily all the time, but they're there.
Right.
So why don't we continue?
Yeah.
Oh, people keep asking about the Eminem video, and that Eminem did a video called Darkness. I'm well aware of Eminem's video called Darkness, and I made 3 videos, by the way, to contest his Darkness video. 2 of them you need to sign in for because you have to be 18, because I use some colorful language, I guess. Yes. And then 1 of them anybody can watch. But yes, I'm well aware of Darkness, and I made 3 videos to counter Darkness. So go to the Johnny Hoover channel and you'll find out what I think of Eminem's Darkness video. I think he's confused.
The one that was like a third of the height of the buildings was looking out this way. So I didn't see that one fire, in these volleys, but it was looking out like it was playing defense. And these were helicopters that looked like they were black, looked like Apaches, definitely looked like fighter helicopters. They had just dim white lights on the tail and the front and the nose there, and it's very as dim as they could probably legally be. I mean, but you could still see them, and it's pretty well illuminated out there. And the camera doesn't really give justice to how close we actually are to Mandalay Bay and how well you can actually see it. But that one was looking out, and it was just hovering there like a wasp. It looked evil. These things, they're designed to look creepy, and they sure do, especially when they're like, you could be on the receiving end to it. It's scary. And but at the time I was just watching. I wasn't scared. I was just like, what the hell is this? And anywhere there were 4 volleys. The ones that were doing the shooting that I saw, they would shoot, and then they would move back behind the building. Like, if you're on the other side of the building, it'd be behind the building. To me, it was just like they were moving in front of the building, right? And they would move to the building like they're ducking, and then they came back out again. A while later, came back out and did another volley.
Keep your head down. Keep your head down. Run that way.
The one by the Luxor did another volley, and this lasted, I don't know, 3-4 minutes or so.
We're at.
Pause.
It sounds like someone.
You can hit pause.
Okay.
So there's a whole bunch of footage that kind of backs up what dog walking guy is saying, right? So we saw a whole ton of footage where the cops keep thinking the shots are coming from Luxor, and he's standing there telling you, no, they're flying around the Luxor and they're coming up and they're higher and whatever. And now it's like we've got this, the corroboration of what we saw in the body cam footage. We now have corroborated again from somebody who wasn't being shot at. He still doesn't know that people were being. We're going to get to the part where he's not even sure. Like, are they making a movie? Like, what the hell's going on here?
John, this point makes him a better witness because he's not under duress. He's not there getting shot at. It's another reason why you might not hear helicopters. As soon as bullets start flying your way, I don't think you're paying attention to too much other than get the hell out of there.
What time code are you at right now? And I'll tell you if we want to go. Do we want to go 10:58 or 12:31?
This is at 9 minutes and something. Now, just real quick, Chrissy Maga says her daughter was shot in Vegas. And this would explain why the sound of helicopters bothers her now.
Yeah. Chrissy, if you want to come on the show or with your daughter, we would love to talk to you a little bit about where she was and how she got shot and all that, because it's there is no evidence that ties the weapons in the room to the bullet that hit your daughter. The FBI never did that testing, and they never presented that evidence. And so that's really the missing linchpin here, is that none of the weapons in the room were connected to anybody that was shot. So we would love to have you on the show, and I'd love to help you with your case against whoever you want to sue as an expert witness. My pleasure.
Now, 10:08 you want to move to, John?
10:58. 10:58.
10:58. Okay. Ready to go on that?
Yeah.
Here we go.
They left. The one by the Luxor came over, and it swooped around and went to the like the east side of Mandalay Bay. And I don't know if that one or the one that was the third, it was playing defense, about a third of the height of the buildings. I can't remember if that one or one of those two fired a volley over Las Vegas. They were over Las Vegas Boulevard at that time. They fired a volley, and then they were off. They went off to, I presume, they kind of went off to the north because they would have been out of frame. And it's pretty tight airspace in there. You have to, like the airport's just, a few hundred yards on the other side of Mandalay Bay. And so.
Whoop.
You can stop it there, and let's jump ahead. You can.
Sure.
So again, what we're seeing on the body cameras from the cops, and we see this aircraft flying over Mandalay Bay towards the venue, is exactly what he's describing. So what he's saying, we got it on footage. Then if we jump ahead to 12:31, I asked him, what did you think you were seeing? What did you think this was? At 12:31, he talks about that.
What did you think you were saying? Did you that they rent helicopters to go and shoot in the desert. You know about that. You're a local. And you probably have seen them filming some movies, right? A bunch of movies have been made locally. What were you thinking as you're seeing this?
Well, that's right. I did think it was a movie for a bit because it's surreal, right? What else is going to be like that? I was thinking, geez, this is a big.
We go to Jason Bourne here.
People are safer because of what you did.
So the Jason Bourne movie was filmed in Vegas. This is the 2016 film Jason Bourne, and they filmed this in Vegas, and they made a mess of the place, right? They tore up Vegas Boulevard, but they do it like at 4 a.m, right?
Then I thought no studio is gonna, not even the biggest studios are not gonna try to achieve this kind of realism where you have the police coming full speed down the 215, 20 miles away, and everybody. That's just not realistic for a movie. There is a bit of a detached feeling at that time because you're like, I didn't hear it. See, I didn't hear the gunfire, and I couldn't hear the helicopters, which is actually a clue that these could be attack helicopters because you could hear Metro from the police helicopters from 2 miles away. I could probably hear them. If they were over there, I could probably hear them from here because they're so loud. But these were quiet. And I think Metro only has 2 helicopters, and there were 3 of these.
Wow, that's a good detail. Metro only has 2. What is the Eye of Horus doing right there?
And like Metro, when they're out, their lights, they're well lit, and the tour helicopters, they have, red lights, green lights, well lit. You can see them easily. These were, just those dim lights. So I didn't know what to think. I knew I was seeing something that was very, very unusual, and I didn't know I was witnessing the biggest massacre in U.S. history, modern U.S. history. I didn't, I'm just out walking my dogs, right? My dogs were actually trying to dig up bowls or something. I actually I was doing something else over on the other side of Las Vegas Boulevard, and I was thinking about driving through there. I like to drive, sometimes it's in the concerts there, I like to drive through. It's kind of fun,
Sure.
And I drove through there at 6:30 actually.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, I remember at 6:30. October 1st is probably like the best weather of the year.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably just
not too hot.
It's just perfect on October 1st, and so it's there were girls walking around like wearing next to nothing, and I remember seeing these cops were like on their motorcycle. Girls were coming up wanting to get pictures with them, being all snuggly with them, and thinking, God, these guys have got the life. They're getting paid overtime for this, right? And a few hours later, everything changed for them.
Tell me more about that first helicopter when you said it looked like a ball of fire was falling off the side of it. Where was it when that happened? Was that in between Mandalay and Delano?
It was, yeah. They flew. They were on the top of the Mandalay Bay, like on that north wing right there, which would have been right above Stephen Paddock's room.
Right.
And then they backed off of there a little bit, and I don't know, they're not far from it, probably, 20, 30 yards from it or something, and down a little bit. So they lowered their altitude slightly, probably about 2/3 of the height of the building. And you have that video, where you see those two little white orbs between the buildings.
Yeah.
Those helicopters, because they stood in that position for a while. I don't know what they were doing, but they stayed there for, I don't know, 30 seconds, a minute or so. And you have video where they captured that. And then you also have the other one on the video I saw recently, which is, are these the real shooters? Like 4 minutes, 12 seconds long or something. And like 3:23 in that video, you can see, you show them, you have them like where they're on scene. Because I remember I made a comment, said, no, those helicopters are flying higher than the tour helicopters that come in.
Right.
Like, if you're out here every night like I am, you notice there are patterns to everything. All these planes, all these helicopters fly in the same patterns, and they don't deviate from them. This is, you got 200,000 people a day flying out of McCarran. It's one of the busiest airports in the country.
That's right.
And there's a lot of air traffic coming out of there. And the tour helicopters, it's a busy air traffic over this valley. So everybody flies the same patterns, and it keeps everything moving well. Well, those tour helicopters, they always fly right over the Maverick ones. They'll fly, and Pappy on the other, but the Maverick come in right over. They fly south over the 215 when they're coming back, or 15 when they're coming back, and probably about 3,000 feet, 2-3 feet above the freeway, about a mile spaced apart from each other. And they would, then they make their turn like over the Mandalay Bay Convention Center, and they start going down. The one that came in, I said it was a little higher than they probably would have been in that position.
Right.
And so they probably came in a little higher than the tour helicopters in case, they wanted to avoid a collision. These guys knew what they were doing. Looking back on it, this was well executed. These guys really knew what they were doing. And anyway, that one came into position at 3:23 on the movie. So you on that video, you've got video of the three helicopters with those little white orbs. And those are the three. They pulled away, and then, they all kind of positioned themselves a little bit. And I don't know, I guess they probably have catchers to catch their spent shells, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm sure they have some.
It's standard. It's standard issue. It comes with the gun. It comes with the weapon, a brass catcher.
So because you never heard any reports of any brass being rained on people.
So you can stop it there.
We heard some reports, not of brass raining, but some, Joe Napoli said that he saw some brass. There was a lady who corroborated that. But obviously the brass catcher is not infallible. If they're firing hundreds or thousands of bullets and a couple of them land, that's probably not unexpected.
And then we also have body cam footage of police officers at Reno and Giles, Alibaba, where there were spent casings and live rounds on the ground and magazines on the ground. How did that happen? over there by the church, right? And we have that footage as well. I think I did a video called "Our Lost and Found is Full," something like that. And it was just like all kinds of scattered stuff: guns, magazines, shell casings, bullets in the bathroom at Paris or something. It's just crazy stuff that shouldn't be anywhere. And this is, this goes back a while. This is a long time ago.
Right.
So,
when people get
they're-
onto the John E. Hoover YouTube channel on YouTube, you're going to want to first watch all the recent coronavirus videos. But here we go. This is the one from last year with Joe and Laura Loomer. And once people go back to, videos, I mean, we've been 7 months or something on coronavirus already, but there is a huge library of Las Vegas research videos here that people can go through when they subscribe to the John E. Hoover YouTube channel.
Indeed. And, the point that the dog walking guy just brought up in the video was he didn't know that there were brass casings that had been found, that had been witnessed by multiple people, including police officers. And yet he watches the channel and he's a subscriber, right? He's a patron on Patreon and just didn't know that stuff, right? Now, that doesn't make him a bad guy or a dummy. It just means there's 300 freaking videos here. Nobody's going to be able to watch all of them. You haven't watched all of them. There's no way. I mean, we're all, I'm doing what I'm doing as fast as I can.
I wouldn't be surprised if there are details you've forgotten, because often people ask me questions about videos from a couple months ago or a year ago, and I'm like, you know what? I don't remember. I'd have to go look. It's a lot of material.
I rewatch them from time to time, and I always, something's always triggered. You always find something. You're like, oh, that's interesting. Mm-hmm. And it may take you down another thread. So why don't we jump ahead to, let's see, at 32 minutes and 19 seconds, he sees something that, again, this kind of changes my understanding of the event. Okay. One of the big things early on was that when you went to Las Vegas with Jake Morphonius, Jake, I guess you guys went to visit Maverick Helicopters, right?
Well, just to be clear, I went to Vegas by myself and ran into him there. But then when I said I'm going over to Maverick, he wanted to join me and he had a rental car. So I said, sure, let's go. And he was very quick to post his story about Maverick Helicopters immediately, which at the time I was extremely annoyed by, since it was my idea and I sort of led us there. But I just sort of chalked it up to, all right, competitive journalism, whatever. Could have been that he wanted to get his story out first to control the bias, set the stake in the ground kind of thing.
Yeah, well, get ahead of the story, right? We know how important anchoring bias is, right?
Anchoring bias.
So getting ahead of the story is key. And, we know that. And, the irony is, if you look at the show that we just did 2 weeks ago with the guys from UK Column, and how awesome a show it was, how well received that show was from everybody's audience, our audience, your audience, his audience, everybody. It was fantastic. That's what we were hoping was going to happen with Jake.
Went the other way.
Yeah, I'll say. I mean, but kind of crazy. I mean, we did a show with Paladin where we were comparing notes and digging into the autopsies, right? Remember we did that thing with Paladin and we were looking at the angles on the headshots, and it was really cooperative work, right? We were really digging into it, and he's good at that stuff. He was good at that autopsy stuff. That was the kind of collaboration I was hoping to have with Jake, like what we did with UK Column, which was incredibly well received. And it was a disaster. And I think everybody was like, what the hell is this? This is kind of crazy. But the thing was, in that argument that, disguised as a show, he mentioned that 4 helicopters left Maverick. And he kept accusing me of not being a professional investigator. Well, now I'm a professional investigator because I make a little bit of money doing this now through Patreon and Subscribestar. But so now I am a professional. But my joke back was, I may not be a professional investigator, but I'm pretty good at counting to 7, because there's 7 helicopters leaving Maverick, not 4. And when you went to Flight Radar, you see 7 helicopters leaving. The clip that we're about to see changes my understanding of what happened. Okay? We talk on the show a lot about illusions, and how easy it is to create an illusion. We know that flight radar was edited after the event. We know that. Okay, I have footage that doesn't exist anymore. What we see on flight radar and what's happening in the sky are not necessarily exactly the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So let's play this clip and see what we can learn here to open our eyes to what might have actually been happening that night, because this is different than anything I've ever heard, and it's changed my entire perspective on this. So why don't we roll this clip at 32:19.
I saw this convoy of helicopters start off like they went, followed over the 95, and I could see when they got, like over the 15, they went over the 95 and spaced about half a mile apart, which is a lot tighter than these things usually fly.
You can kill that music.
I don't mind. It'll just be a copyright warning.
You
Right,
can
or do
jump
they take-
ahead
And
to
they went
30.
over the 95, and then they went south over Rainbow, took a left turn at Rainbow, and flew down Rainbow. And the first two were Maverick 2 helicopters, and they flew over the 215 and took a left, between the 215 and Warm Springs, and went back to McCarran. The third was one of these attack helicopters, one of the killers, and it was about 2/3 the size of the Maverick 2 helicopters, if that tells you anything. And they went to the right. They took a right and went to the southwest, like they would have gone over the Walmart parking lot there, 215 and Rainbow.
Pause it here. And
Now, John,
let's jump up.
people,
Yeah.
Sorry, real quick. People are asking about, these helicopters would have shown up on radar. They're not like sending out huge radar sweeps looking for invading aircraft. The radar is designed to pick up a radio transponder, right?
Correct. Now,
So if that's off,
it
you
doesn't
don't see
mean
it.
that there isn't a radar, right? There is a radar, but that's not what they're primarily using anymore. In order to get the radar feed, we would need to file a FOIA request with the FAA, and Shepard already did that, and it was refused. So we're not going to get the radar feed. Now, this is the feed from, I think it's called ADSB, or one of the pilots in the audience will type it into the chat. I think it's called ADSC or ADS, something like that. And it's some sort of transponder system that's electronic. It's not radar based. And we have the audio from the tower. And the tower, air traffic control at McCarran, isn't even aware that there's an attack until 10:18. And the shooting's already stopped, and they were not even aware of it until 10:18. So no, they don't see these other aircraft. And remember, it's busy airspace, and there's a lot of private aircraft there too. They're not expecting this. They're not expecting an attack from within. No one's expecting that. Just like the gorilla. Nobody's expecting the gorilla. Nobody sees the gorilla. That's how it works. So let's jump forward to 34 minutes and 30 seconds.
Yeah, we're there.
Okay.
And went off, crossed over Durango, and just south of Mount Potosi is where they crossed over the mountains there. And as it looked to me as they were moving, as they're going there, they were dropping altitude. The elevation rises a little bit, but they appeared to be dropping altitude. So when they got I could just see a faint dim light over the mountains when they eventually got there. But they were almost at the crest of those mountains. Like they weren't giving themselves much space to get over the mountains, And anyway, so that was the third helicopter. There's a couple more tour all the rest of the tour helicopters made the same turn to the left. Number 7 was another attack helicopter. It did the same thing. And number 13, believe there's 17 total of those helicopters in that convoy. It took about 10 minutes for this thing to go through.
17
how they got away.
helicopters. 17 helicopters.
I'm pretty sure it was 17. And they, so what they did, I mean, this just infuriates me when, looking back at it, right? I'm trying to be calm and give you a, calm recollection of this, but this is a highly charged event for me.
Of course.
And so Eric,
Turn it down for a second. So this is what I mean by he's bringing new information to the story. He's not just going along with the John Cullen hymnal and saying, "Yeah, I saw 7 helicopters leave." I mean, he's changing the story here based on his account. And so what I do is I take his account now into consideration, right? He's introducing the notion that there were well more than 7 helicopters, right? He's also introducing the notion that the attacking helicopters flew away in formation with Maverick.
Wow.
Which takes guts. I mean, you're talking about, like they're waving to the guys. I mean, you're talking about, this took gumption, man. This took serious gumption. If what he's saying is, if I'm interpreting it correctly.
There was an early speculation, John, about Maverick Helicopter's owner having some alleged previous involvement with the CIA in 2000 or 2002, Indeed. Going to Afghanistan to try to purchase a Russian helicopter. There's a Maverick Aviation in, where's Jeff Sessions from? Alabama, that this guy's name was associated with. There's a lot of strange connections there.
Look, it's not a secret. The family that owns Maverick, right? He was a Vietnam helicopter pilot. He built the company doing tours to the Grand Canyon and Hawaii, right? And they just kept buying helicopters. And when the government needed help getting some of these big helicopters out of Afghanistan, they asked him to help out. Again, that doesn't make this guy a bad guy for helping his government that he used to work for as a helicopter pilot. So he's a big guy in Vegas, right? The company owns 50 helicopters that are $3.5 million a piece. I think what they did at Maverick that night was the most heroic thing ever. And I think the pilots that work at Maverick are absolute heroes. And they took somebody out of harm's way that night because there was no reason for them to depart at 10:12 p.m. while there was still gunfire. Why would you do that? The aircraft had just landed at Sundance at 10:05. And at 10:05, the people got off that aircraft at Sundance and were panic-stricken. We did videos on that where we have interviews with the people that just got off the helicopters at Sundance. They were panic-stricken, like they just flew into a war zone. And yet, 7 minutes later, Maverick is departing with what we see on flight radar appears to be 7 helicopters. Jake Morphonius counts 4, but our eyewitness says it appears there were a total of 17, but a number of those were also bad guys, right? So the question then is, well, how many of those aircraft came from Maverick? We can account for 7 of them. Were there more that left Maverick that had no transponders on? They never turned on the transponder. Absolutely, that's a possibility. And if that happened, we would not know that there were 3, 4, 5 more helicopters in that formation if there were additional Maverick helicopters that never turned on their transponders. So it's a fascinating aspect of the story that he's introducing here that we'd never considered before. Why don't we jump ahead to 4353?
4353. And to remind everybody, they're going to be able to see the entire video on subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen and patreon.com/IamJohnCullen later tonight. And then on Sunday on the John E. Hoover YouTube channel, people will be able to see the full documentary. We're just looking at some excerpts here, the full interview with dog walking guy, 4353. Here we go.
Guys were kind of hugging the terrain. It looked like. He said it looked like they knew what they were doing. These guys were good.
These guys were good. I mean, I don't want to dignify what they did. But I'm telling you, when they were around, when I saw them around Mandalay Bay, geez, the way they moved was like aerial ballet. They were so quick and precise and deliberate with their moves.
That's because we trained them. That's because we taught them.
Yeah.
Thank you, Frank.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, great job, Frank. Thanks, Frank.
Yeah. Fast with some people who actually trained him, yeah. And they were good. They were really, I can understand why nobody saw them. When people down on the ground wouldn't have seen them, because like I said, they docked. And these things are quiet too. And they're right over. Like, you don't hear anybody saying, I heard helicopters, do you? Yeah. Did they say they heard them?
Yeah, we have a couple.
Oh, they did? Okay.
Yeah, we've got a couple witnesses that heard them, saw them.
22, 16, and 24 seconds.
Okay, and you're hiding under where?
Flying in a helicopter.
Yes, we have all kinds of help on the way, okay? Everything's going to be okay. We're getting officers out there. Okay?
Yeah, you're going to see the officers on the sky. He's flying in a helicopter.
You think he's in a helicopter?
Yes. He's in a helicopter.
I would
the first round of shots I heard, I thought.
Stop it, you said?
So again, yeah, so once again, he's been watching our stuff. He's a fan. He's a subscriber on Patreon. But he's never heard the Clarissa interview. And to me, the Clarissa interview is like the pivotal piece of the puzzle on, before his testimony. Clarissa's testimony was key, right? Now we've got someone else who was on a different aspect, a different perspective, giving us almost the same type of an account. And yet when I mentioned Clarissa, he's like, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. Who's Clarissa? Which is fascinating to me.
And she's an eyewitness who said she swears to God she saw a helicopter. Those were her words.
She was rather effusive about her insistence and that this was not she was not hallucinating. So there's one other aspect. I think we're at an hour on the show already, and I know you've got another show tonight with Mike, and I don't want to bump into that. So let me just sort of wrap up and let everybody know what to expect when they watch this entire interview with the dog walking guy. At the end of the interview, he shares something that is absolutely earth-shattering. Now, it's secondhand, but it is earth-shattering, all right? And that's at the end of the interview. And I want to save that for people who decide that they, want to come and join Patreon or Subscribestar and become a patron. I want to leave something for them so that they feel like they kind of got their money worth. So Sunday night at 10 p.m., this whole YouTube video will go live. I think it's an hour and 10 minutes. So everybody will be able to see it Sunday at 10 p.m. And tonight, October 1st at 10 p.m., it'll get released on Patreon and Subscribestar for my patrons. And there'll be like a promo video. I'm putting out like a 10-minute promo tonight at 10 o'clock also. And I didn't want people watching this when you were doing the thing with Michael Moore. So it'll be when your show ends with Michael Moore, it goes live.
Great. People will be able to
see
that's
more the story.
Tonight at 8. All right. Well, John, I mean, as usual, absolutely incredible work. I think people's minds are blown. I will say I agree with the chat. I miss the old music. No offense to your composition skills, but that was your signature sound. Now that we're totally demonetized anyway, you might as well bring the old song back. But I think
I'll tell everybody the story. There's a story behind why I don't use the song, and it's not just a demonetization. It came from a certain company, and the name and title of the song and the name of the artist changed.
What does that indicate?
How could it's something strange? I'm like, well, how could that be? How could the song that was called, Critical Thinking now has a new name and a new artist associated with it? And I'm like, well, if I licensed it as this and now you change the name to that, that's a little strange. So I said, I don't want to be associated with you guys anymore. And they're based in Sweden. You don't think of weird stuff coming out of Sweden, but that's why I don't use that anymore. They were changing some of the licensing and changing the names and the name of the artist. It was bizarre. It was like,
I still like that song.
I do too, but I'm not going to patronize their nonsense.
We had one other really good question from Salty Muse. She was saying that dogs are very sensitive to explosions and gunfire, and they've got an intuitive sense of danger. Did Dog Walking Guy talk at all about what his dogs were doing at the time? Didn't talk about it.
No. Digging up bones. Digging up bones. Yeah. But, again, I think it's a fascinating account of what happened because he didn't realize what it was until he gets home and turns on the television.
Right.
And he gets home and he turns on the TV and he's like, oh my God. And for 3 years, he sat on it. Because one of the things we talk about in the documentary is, who can you tell?
Well, also, did he necessarily know what he even saw? Because what you just told us, this is a guy, it's easy for us 3 years later, knowing everything that we know about it now, to say, why did this person do this or that? But, I mean, he's just out there walking his dog, sees a bunch of strange stuff, goes home, sees there was a shooting, and then he's like, well, wait a minute. But then they're still telling him on the news, oh, no, this was the guy in the hotel room. He's thinking, well, were those the cops? What was it? Right. He's confused. And then he's watching your show for years, and these things start to click into place. And now we've got another big piece of the puzzle from the dog walking guy. John, it's really amazing. And in the description for the video here, I said that nobody has done more or more comprehensive investigative work into this than you have. And I really got to thank you, John. It's been a revelation, and you've been a tremendous aspect and asset to Crowdsource the Truth. I want to make sure that people watching us now know that they can see our regular show, John Cullen Investigates, every Friday, and we'll be back tomorrow at 6 p.m. People can watch that on subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen, patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, and Patreon and Subscribestar/Crowdsource the Truth. I also want to make sure people watching today who have found this information as interesting as I have will go over to the John E. Hoover YouTube channel and subscribe. You can fill yourself in and study all of John's research on the Las Vegas shooting by scrolling back about 6 or 7 months. We've been doing a lot of work on the coronavirus since then, but Vegas is not going away, and it hasn't gone away. No. We just can't keep talking about the same stuff again and again. We've sort of decided to keep these broadcasts to, limited to new information, and this qualifies as that. Astounding new testimony from a first-hand witness. John, really well done. Anything you want to say before we wrap it up for tonight?
Well, there was a settlement that was announced by the judge. The judge gave the green light to the $800 million settlement. There's about 4,000 people who are participating in that out of the 22,000 that were in the audience. I'm hoping that you'll know this because you're almost a lawyer. With or without prejudice. If they settle it, with or without prejudice means they can come back and fix it if it turns out it was wrong.
There is no with or without prejudice. If you settle it, that's it. One of the components of the settlement agreement is definitely going to be you can never come back and sue us again. So this just happened yesterday, John, that the court approved this $800 million Las Vegas shooting settlement. MGM Resorts and insurers will compensate 4,400 relatives and victims to settle dozens of lawsuits. It's interesting. We need to keep on this because, you know, Barry Diller, the chairman and CEO of IAC, the interactive corp that owns Vimeo and has been giving us so many problems lately, he recently joined the board of directors. He took a $1 billion stake. IAC took a $1 billion stake in MGM Resorts. That was like 2 weeks ago. And then now we have this settlement. I don't know what that means, but it's interesting.
Well, we know that MGM Resorts has laid off a dramatic number of people. I don't want to cite the number until you search for it, but MGM Resorts just had a major layoff. We know that they sold their assets off and are now renting back their real estate that they used to own. So, you know, that's not a sign of a company that's in good shape.
Yeah. But he's got some idea if he's investing $1 billion in it.
Yeah, they're online gambling. So MGM Resorts has some online gambling patents. And that's what Barry Diller's interested in, is their MGM. I read the article.
I agree. That makes sense. I think I read that somewhere also. So thank you for, maybe we read the same article, but I agree. It's also interesting to note viewers of David Hawkins' Discovery CSI will recall that Howard Lutnick, the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, also holds quite a few patents in real-time interactive wagering on event outcomes. Certainly this Las Vegas shooting was an event, and places like White's Club in London have a history of death pool betting. I'm not saying that MGM Resorts, I'm not saying that any of these things knew about this or had anything to do with it. We're just presenting a variety of coincidental facts. But we're going to keep looking at this, John. I have a feeling that we're at a point where the Las Vegas investigation is going into some different directions now. And some of what we're talking about right here might be relevant to that. But again, as new information becomes available and is brought to our attention, certainly if there are viewers in the audience, if there are people who have firsthand information, we encourage them to come forward. But John, we'll be back tomorrow at 6 p.m. I want to thank all of the generous Patreon and Subscribestar sponsors who make this show possible. I can't bring you amazing guests like John Cullen and his fantastic research without your support. It's the first of the month, so it's a great time to subscribe. People can sponsor Crowdsource the Truth at subscribestar.com/crowdsource the truth or patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. And we've just started adding annual subscriptions so you can save money and get a great deal. People can sponsor John Cullen at subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen and patreon.com/IamJohnCullen. I'll be back in about 45 minutes. Thanks for watching, everybody.